Buenos días, mi gente de Rochester, y bienvenido a su Hora Informativa. Mi nombre es Ida Pérez y para mí es un verdadero placer poder estar con ustedes en esta mañana. Su Hora Informativa es un programa que les trae información importante que esperamos que los inspire a una mejor calidad de vida para usted y su familia. Cubrimos información sobre los campos de salud, educación, empleo, vivienda y muchos otros temas más que nos afectan como persona y como pueblo. Su Hora Informativa está aquí todos los sábados de 10 a 11 de la mañana y esperamos que nos acompañen todos los sábados como lo están haciendo en el día de hoy. Hoy tengo una invitada muy especial y le voy a pedir a ella que se presente, que nos diga su nombre y de dónde es originalmente. So I was just saying that I have a very special guest here today and that I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're originally from and how long you've been here in Rochester.
Okay. My name is Arlene Wilson. I was born in the city of Brooklyn, New York. I've been here since I was 3 years old.
Okay. What brought you from Brooklyn to here?
Love and marriage. My mother.
Your mom.
My mother's from Guyana, and my father's from Barbados.
Okay.
And they met out in Toronto.
Okay.
And so, you know, if you're going to find some place to be together and you can get a job in Rochester at Kodak back in the day, Rochester was a good place to land.
Yeah. And what brought your parents from Barbados and from Ghana? Like, what brought them to the United States?
Economic opportunities.
Yeah.
In Guyana, there was a joke that either you are a maid or you have one.
Oh.
In Barbados, it was you're going to work in the fields if you get any work at all. You're a fisherman, you work in the fields, and that's it.
Yeah.
So any opportunity to improve yourself, save some money, own a house, you come to the United States.
Yeah.
Similar.
What year did they come? Do you know?
I know my father came I laugh. He came in 1967, the day of the Rochester riots. And the cab driver dropped him off at Upper Falls and said, "You on your own." And, you know, there was police and fighting and fires.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that didn't scare him away.
He just prayed and hoped he could find his way to... Now I'm dating myself. Hanover houses? You remember Hanover
of course.
Okay,
of course.
so-
Yes.
Yeah, so he was staying with family in Hanover houses,
Yeah.
and that's how he got his start.
Yeah. And I like to ask that question because, you know, oftentimes people think that we're very different and we're not, right?
No,
we
no,
all
no.
come here for the same reasons.
Yes.
You know, and also with Rochester, you know, a lot of people complain about Rochester and how cold it is and this and that and the other. But a lot of people find Rochester to be their home, you
Yes.
know, and I often hear, you know, it was a better place than where we were. You know, it was more calm, more greenery, you know, whatever the case may be. And interesting enough, you know, it's either for better opportunities, for work, you know, because they had family or they followed love.
Yes.
And
yes.
so it's always interesting to me how our stories are very, very similar.
Yes,
So
very
that's why I
similar.
asked that question. And where do you work, Arlene? Tell us a little bit about what the type of work that you do.
Okay. I'm a senior director for programs at the Alzheimer Association of Rochester and the Finger Lakes. And so it's an organization that helps provide supports and education for caregivers, taking care of family with dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. There's a whole array of different cognitive decline diseases that fall under the Alzheimer's umbrella.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that, because I know that, you know, we've all experienced someone either with dementia or Alzheimer's or even Parkinson's. Tell us a little bit about each of those illnesses.
Yes. So I'll start with dementia. Dementia is when you lose, the term is cognitive functioning, but it's the ability to handle your day-to-day living independently, your ability to cook, to clean, to dress yourself, to pay your bills, to solve problems, to plant a garden, to plan a dinner, any of those things that we take for granted because our brain is working effectively. When we start losing those facilities, that's dementia. And so we've had, you know, good news and bad news. We're seeing more celebrities that are coming out with some of these things. So there's a type of dementia called Lewy body, and Robin Williams had Lewy body. There's another type called frontal temporal. So Bruce Willis has that, and another media person, Wendy Williams, has that. So this is where you see behavior out of characters.
And they're not like super elderly either.
No.
Like they're not, they're fairly what I would consider young.
Yeah. So we're seeing these things. Usually they start to manifest themselves in the 60s. But there's some people who have what's called early onset, and you may see it even in the early 40s.
And what does that look like when you say you start seeing that in the early? What would that look like for a person in their 40s? Like, what are those signs?
So for the early onset, it happens very quickly. This is mom forgetting how to make spaghetti sauce. This is mom putting together a Sunday dinner and forgetting to turn off the stove or the oven so everything burns up.
Right.
Or forgetting how to do laundry and how to sort the laundry and maybe just leaving it in the washing machine for a week, wet and moldy. This is dad not remembering how to drive to his son's house or how to drive to work.
Wow.
So those kind of things are what you see.
Wow. So what about Alzheimer's? Like, what's the difference between one and the other?
So Alzheimer's it's a cognitive decline. It's a progression. There is no cure, and it is fatal. So you get to a point that your brain can't function, and now toward the end, you forget how to eat. You forget how to chew. You forget how to swallow. And so you need to be able to do those things to live. You lose your language. Some people, they lose their ability to walk, they lose their balance. So we call it the long goodbye because you're slowly losing parts of who you are. So you're seeing mom, you're seeing dad, or you're seeing your spouse, but they're not the person that you know.
Right. And I often hear people say, they're not there anymore.
Yes.
They're there, but they're not there anymore.
Yes, very much, yes.
Yeah. Now, you didn't say that about dementia, and I don't know if you just didn't mention it, but you said there's no cure for Alzheimer's. But is there a cure or something different that can be done with dementia?
So with dementia, what we're trying to do is to educate people early. In the Latino community, African American community, we see Alzheimer's and dementia twice as often in African American and 1.5 times in Latino. Some of that has to do with health. Some of that has to do with diet and exercise. And one of our new campaigns is what's good for the heart is good for the brain. So we want people to understand the importance of eating well, the fruits and the vegetables, not smoking, backing away from the alcohol. And, walking, working out, whatever exercise that you will commit to and continue to do, that's the best exercise. And then the other thing is, once we're out of school, we're like afraid of a book, like it's kryptonite, like it's going to explode or something bad's going to happen if we sit and read a book. But that's really important for the brain. The brain is like a muscle, and we need to exercise it. And so with dementia, if you can address some of these issues early in your 20s, in your 30s, and make those changes, we're seeing that with the early onset, you can stay at an early onset stage where you need some help, but you're 90% still who you are. And that early stage can last now 20, 30 years. But if we don't make those changes and we don't start to address it early, some people will go from early stage, that's maybe 2 or 3 years, to the mid stage, which might be 3 or 4 years, to the late stages, which is where you've kind of lost everything you knew about grandma or grandpa and the interaction.
I remember when my father passed away, at the very beginning after the funeral, and everybody, left that was visiting from out of town or whatever, that came, from out of town for the funeral and whatnot. My mom was spending a lot of time by herself at home. We all worked, and although we took, turns taking care of her, she did spend some bit of a time by herself. And at the time, she wasn't, unable to do anything because she took care of my father. But we noticed that that she would forget things,
Yes.
and so one of them were like, I would, because I ended up moving in with her, and I would ask her, Mom, who came to see you today? And she would say, oh, not a soul. No one came, and then come to find out, my brother came, my aunt came, my uncle came, so we were like, So I created a sign-in sheet for people to sign in when they came. So we knew,
Nice.
their name, the time that they came, and the date. And so when she would say that to me, I would go back and I was like, no, but, it says here that so-and-so, and then she would remember.
Yes.
And then she would tell me about her day, and I'm like,
And I'm gonna stop you there because those are the type of things that we encourage people to do at the Alzheimer's Association. We do what we call a care consultation, either in person or on the phone, and we sit down with people to help them come up with strategies to help their loved ones.
Yeah.
So when they're not remembering and you want to know who came by, they're okay to be by themselves for a little bit, but you want to make sure they ate, or you want to make sure somebody saw they went to the bathroom or whatever. If you have that sign-in sheet, that's a way of checking in.
Yeah.
For some families, we encourage different people out of town to give them a call. And so we know at 2:00, one sister's calling at 6:00. The son is calling. At midday, one of the grandchildren are going to stop by. So that's really helpful.
Yeah. And so we got to a point where we scheduled ourselves, a couple of the siblings that could. And so, my sister would spend the morning with her, and then my brother would come in the afternoon, and then I was there in the evening.
Nice.
And, so we took turns, and so she always had somebody to talk to and whatnot. But then we also noticed with the cooking, she would forget to turn off the stove.
Yes.
We didn't want her to get confused and things of that nature. And so, that helped her. And she lasted several years after my dad passed. She died at 91. And her mind was still clear. Like, she knew who we were.
Oh,
She knew our names. So I don't think it ever developed into Alzheimer's, right? But we did notice that we had to keep her in conversation and company, and then her mind would be clear. But we noticed if she sat by herself for long periods of time without talking to anyone, then we would, start losing her.
And that's so important, the socialization. People don't realize, we have our smart devices and we can sit in our house and stream shows for days and days and days, but we need that human interaction. And it actually helps to stimulate the brain. It helps to grow new neurons and helps the brain to process. So when people are isolated, when they're alone, you see a quicker mental decline. But if they're engaged, that's why, places like Centro de Oro are so valuable to our community because it's helping seniors stay engaged. And some people who have some early dementia, they're not progressing as quickly because they have this interaction.
Right. And I'm really glad that we kind of picked that up early. And we started this sign-in sheet thing that was really, really helpful. But then I also have my aunt who also passed away, and she did have, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but, she was a person that I was really surprised to know how far gone she had, gone with the disease, because she was a person that read a lot. She loved reading magazines and cookbooks and books and the Bible. She wrote several songs and poetry. And so just to think that, and my mother never read. My mother never learned how to read or write. So, books were not an option for her.
So let me jump in there and say the other type of dementia that we see, and much more with Latinos and African Americans, is what we call vascular dementia. So if somebody has had a stroke, somebody's been in a car accident or had a head injury or crashed on a motorcycle or a mini bike, they have high blood pressure, they have diabetes. All of that impacts how your blood flows in your body and impacts how the blood flows in your brain.
Okay.
So if people have had any of those things, even those, they call them TIAs, those mini strokes. If you have those in your 30s and your 40s, now when you get to your 60s, now you might see some of that memory loss. You may see some of that cognitive decline.
Yeah.
And that seems to impact brown and black people more than other sectors of the community.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. So I don't know the health history of your family, but you know, if you trace back kind of on those things, like of the two, who ate more fruits and vegetables? Who ate a lot of processed food, chips, sweets, and a lot of rice? Who was out walking more or more active around the house? And then who had blood pressure, diabetes, and those type of illnesses that were not well managed? Because, you know, we get those medicines because we have this and we say, I don't want to take the medicine. I'm going to just pray on it. Well, pray on it and take the medicine. Okay? Do it.
Right. Yeah.
You know, do the two together. Or, you know, say, well, I want to eat healthier. I'm going to try and change my diet. Great. So work on changing the diet. Work on exercising. And work with your doctor to maybe cut down on the medicine if your numbers are better.
And I don't know of my aunt ever having, like, being in a car accident or having a head injury or anything like that. I'm not sure about, I don't think she had diabetes. I'm not sure about her blood pressure. You know, it was just really interesting to me that, you know, that someone that was so active, because she was extremely active, very talkative, you know, very intellectual. She liked to read a lot. Like I said, she, you know, wrote things and, you know, was very active. And then, but she was so different from my mom. She was so far gone than my mother. You know, and so that never really made sense to me as to why, you know, why this happened to her.
We always say, if you have Alzheimer's, you know, if your mother has Alzheimer's, she has Alzheimer's. If your aunt has Alzheimer's, how it looks with your aunt is going to be very different than how it looks with your mom. And so it could be just those differences. Also, when you're doing more of the positive things that helps your brain stay active and helps the blood flow to your brain, and the hard thing with Alzheimer's, you really don't know how bad it impacted the brain until after death and you do an autopsy. But there are people who are functioning pretty well. And, you know, when they kind of compare, they'll say, well, the key feature of Alzheimer's is these protein buildup in the brain called plaques and tangles. And that some people may have the same amount of plaques and tangles, but if they were more active, if they ate better, if they were more social, their brain grew new pathways to be able to do those things. So they may have the disease, but by doing the other positive things, they've found ways to grow new brain capacity. I guess is the best way I can say it.
Now, I know you talked a little bit about Latinos and African Americans here in Monroe County. Like, what is the statistics for folks in our area when it comes to, you know, Alzheimer or dementia, either or both?
Good question. So we have almost 7 million Americans living with Alzheimer's.
Wow.
In Monroe County, of the population that's over 65, we have 15,900. So it's 11.7%.
Wow.
In our area. We don't have it broken down by race, but just looking at the national numbers. So if it's, you know, 11% generally, it's probably 20% in the Latino and African American communities.
Wow.
So it's much more prevalent. I haven't met an African American or Latino who does not have somebody in their family.
Yeah, me too.
But I've met white people who don't. And I'm like, wow, nobody? And they say, you have in your family? I stopped counting at 9. Mom, dad, grandmother, mother-in-law, you know, uncles, sister.
So my mom was the only daughter, but my dad, you know, had 8 siblings, and all of my aunts, when they've gotten to a certain age, you know, they have suffered. You know, they have had signs of it. And so definitely on my dad's side, you know, it's more prominent. You know, my mom, I wouldn't know because she was the only daughter, so it's hard to tell. But we did see those little signs of dementia at the very beginning. But like I said, when my mom died at 91, she still knew who we were. She knew our names, you know, she knew all of that. So, but she couldn't do much for herself. Like, you know, we pretty much took very, you know, care of her for all of her needs. But but a part of that was also her age. She was 91.
Right.
So,
Right.
but it's just interesting how different it could be for every person. Like I feel like every person, it could be very different.
Very much.
Yeah.
And so going back to what we're saying about, what's good for the heart is good for the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like that.
We've heard a lot about heart disease and what we can do to be healthy, and the importance of exercising and the importance of eating right. And I think for people of color, it's a little challenging. We like our cultural foods and we like to support our cultural businesses, and we have to now start thinking differently. And encourage our cultural businesses. If they're going to do peas and rice, can you do peas with brown rice? Okay.
Right.
If you're going to do peas and rice, can you try some meat alternatives in there? Can you throw some more vegetables in there?
Right.
I was at an event on Friday night with the Rochester Association of Black Journalists, and they had a West Indian Caribbean caterer. And I said, okay, I'm skipping the mac and cheese. I'm doing the peas and rice and the salad, and you got cabbage. Okay, and let me have a double portion of cabbage.
Right.
And he looked at me like, you're not going to have, no, I'm not going to have that. No, I'm not going to have that. No, I'm not going to have that. Because, you have to make those changes within yourself.
Right.
And the exercising.
Yeah. And diet, we oftentimes, when I talk to folks here about, subjects that are related to health, diet is always on the top of the list. How we eat, what we eat, how often we eat it, how much we eat it, that type of thing. So that's always, always on the top of the list when it comes to health and well-being. But, again, having those alternatives and what other things can we substitute for it. I was watching something the other day on seasonings and how we should go back, because I remember when we wanted yellow rice, we didn't open a little package and pour it in there. We had the little grains, I forget what they're called.
Oh, the saffron.
Yeah, the saffron, and we would boil, we would heat that up in oil, and that would be our seasoning. And they literally said, go back to that.
Go back to that. That's
go back to that, because that one little packet that you open, and I remember growing up, my mom never used anything out of a packet. Everything was made in the kitchen, whatever it was, the seasoning and everything. And so they said, go back to that.
That's what we have to go back to. And like, I remember my grandmother used to make her own hot sauce, right? She'd grow the peppers and onions and chop that up. And so we need to go back to those things.
Yes, to those things. We've made things too convenient, they're not good. They're not good for us.
Right. Yeah. And again, too much salt, too much oil. So, can you cook that in a broth instead of frying it in oil? I'm not quite there yet, but I'm using less oil. But definitely the seasonings.
And a lot of people use the air fryers now, and they say that the food is just as good.
It's just as good. I fought that tooth and nail, and we got it, and I'm like, I wish we had gotten this sooner.
Yeah, I have one. It's kind of bulky, so I don't keep it in my kitchen, but I do have one. But I usually bake I bake a lot. I'd rather bake the meat than fry it or anything else. But, diet is such a big part of it. It's interesting that you mentioned earlier that when you talk to Caucasian people, that they can say, I don't have anybody in my family, that most likely will see it more in Latinos and African Americans. Just talk to us a little bit about that, because people may think that, dementia or Alzheimer's is a white person's disease, but it sounds like it's not.
It's not. And, we've actually had some of our medical committees really dive deep into those health disparities and what it is. And one big one is medical access. As you know, people of color, we don't necessarily always have all the health insurances. It's a lot of paperwork to get done. And so between the language barrier, the literacy barrier, and the lack of trust, we a lot of times go without those things. So we're getting our health care in the emergency room. Right?
Yeah.
So when you go to the emergency room, now you're at a more severe level. There's no prevention in the emergency room, right? There's no, intervention that's going to, slowly get you back to health. You're dealing in crisis. So that's how we approach health is in crisis, and that's part of our problem. Then another thing that was studied by the Alzheimer's Association, they documented it, is racism. And the stress of racism, the stress of prejudice, it raises your blood pressure. It raises your cholesterol. It's correlated with drinking more. It's correlated with smoking more.
Yeah.
And that's real. And
Wow.
that's not going away.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You know, I often think about how people approach or how people kind of explain, you know, whatever might be happening with their elderly parent or maybe a grandmother or something. Oh, no, she's just getting old. You know, how often do you hear that this loss of memory or, you know, this forgetfulness of doing things that they normally did, you know, they're kind of putting it off and, you know, blaming age and not anything else. You know, how often do you see that, and how much of that has to do with the fact that people may not get help in a timely manner because family members are saying, no, she's just old. She's just getting older.
So there are some things that come with getting older. You know, you have aches and pains. The winter just seems to hit the body harder.
Yeah.
And we say, like, if you can't find your glasses or your keys, that's not Alzheimer's. If you don't remember how to start the car with your keys, that might be, that's an issue, right?
Yeah.
Not wanting to, you know, maybe being late on a payment may not necessarily be Alzheimer's, but making the same payment 3 times or missing 6 payments in a row, that's a bigger issue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's interesting that you said about turning on the car, because I had an aunt that once came to my center where I worked, and she said she couldn't turn off the car, that she couldn't turn off the car.
Right.
And then I remember kind of not freaking out, but, you know, I quickly called 2 people that I knew that can come quick to help because I didn't know if there was something wrong with the car.
Right.
And they said, she just didn't turn it off.
Right.
She just didn't turn it off.
Right.
And so that was like a really big frag. And I remember, you know, calling my cousin and saying, hey, you know, we got to talk about this because, you know, this really freaked me out and something's wrong here, you know. And then after that, you know, the family did what they had to do for her. But, you know, it was that not being able to turn off the car.
Right.
You know, and it's interesting because I never thought about it until this point.
And that's where you need that family intervention. And I say that somebody's got to be the good cop and somebody's got to be the bad cop. And we want to be respectful of our parents and our elders, and we don't want to question people.
Yeah, right.
But, you know, you go over Abuela's house and you see there's 2 or 3 disconnect notices on the table. You are not being polite by not saying anything.
Yeah.
Now, Abuela might be mad at you for bringing this up. But you know what? Abuela's lights will be on, and Abuela won't be evicted because you were a little rude and you got in Abuela's business.
Right.
That needs to happen.
Yeah. And that's how I kind of felt, you know, with my cousin. Like I felt, okay, am I crossing the line? But, you know, but it really concerned me. It concerned me for her safety. It concerned, you know, and I had seen a few other little things, but, you know, kind of putting all of that together, I was like, something's not right here. Something's not right. But you know, like you said, you kind of, and I think that's, you know, that's a really good point to make, that sometimes we as family members may see things, but feel that it's not our place to say something, or that we're going to offend someone, or we don't know how that person's going to take it. Yeah. But, you know, I'm glad that I did what I did at the time that I did it, because she was able to get the help that she needed.
Yes. And just think of what if she went to Walmart on Hudson and left the car running. Yeah. What if she went to Eastview Mall and left the car running? And then she comes out and there's no car.
Yeah.
So now a small problem is a bigger problem.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. But I think us as Latinos, you know, and whoever's listening, like, we have to get over that, right? We have to get over the fact that, okay, they might be mad at me, you know, they might be upset or whatever. And not that my cousins were, but, you know, I had to kind of deal with that. Okay, I have to, you know, do I say something? And then I was like, nope, I have to say something. Like, this is too scary, and I don't want her to get hurt.
And I had to be that person. I said, why do I have to be that with my mom? I'm the youngest.
Yeah.
It's because it needs to get done. And if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. So, and I tell you that story because, you know, that happened with my mom, and she was in the beginning of being evicted from a house that she had purchased because she wasn't keeping up with the bills.
Right.
And, you know, she wasn't current with other things. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
So then you start checking. And now as family, you have to check everything, right?
Right.
You check the bills, check in the fridge.
Yeah.
Is the food going bad?
Right.
Is there food in the fridge?
Right.
Because when people have dementia or they have Alzheimer's, they may not be able to smell or taste. So they might be eating food that's gone bad.
Oh, wow.
And then you're like, you know, you see mom's sick. Her stomach's upset. Her stomach's upset. 'Cause she's eating food that's gone bad.
That's gone bad. Yeah.
Or she's getting very thin. Why is she getting thin? She's not going grocery shopping. She doesn't really know how to do it anymore.
Yeah.
She doesn't know how to get there.
Yeah.
So she just doesn't do it.
Right. Wow. Talk to us a little bit about the people that are caring for people with dementia or with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, because we really haven't talked about Parkinson's, but, you know, what happens to those folks?
So they undergo a lot of stress, and we really focus on how we can help the caregivers. So we have books, we have magazines that talk about different aspects of the journey. So I brought you a couple.
Yeah, and they're really cool. These are all really, really cool books that people can access, right? Have access to.
Yes, so we can, you know, come by the office. We can get you a couple of books to read. We have a ton of pamphlets and different flyers that kind of help you understand what's going on. And then we offer 24 hours, 7-day-a-week phone coverage and services.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, you'll find that for some people, they're okay during the day, but they don't sleep at night. They're up and down. There's a whole issue called sundowning, where when the sun goes down, the personality changes, right?
Yeah.
So you may have somebody who's very calm until the sun goes down. Then they want to go back to Puerto Rico. They want to go back to San Juan. But they don't mean San Juan now. They mean San Juan when they were 20.
Yeah, when they were 20.
Or when they were 15.
Yeah.
They want to go back to their high school.
Yeah.
They want to go back to the church and their first confirmation. They're in a whole different place.
Right.
And so they're upset with you. They're upset with whoever's there because they want to go back. They want to go.
What do people do in a situation? Because we had something similar happen to that with one of my aunts. We were, as a matter of fact, we were in a family meeting. We were planning for our family reunion for the summer, and we had a meeting, and then all of a sudden my aunt became very verbal, very demanding, that she wanted to leave and she wanted to go and this and that. And, I don't really remember everything that she said, but, and so how do people handle that? Like, what do you say?
So one of the things we would advise her through our care consultations is you have to develop a strategy to distract her and keep her calm.
Okay.
So like my grandmother, my mother-in-law, for example, had that issue. She always wanted to go back down south. So everybody would have a day. They would come with the car and they would drive her. And they just drive around Rochester, Monroe County for about 45 minutes until the sun's down and it's dark, and then they bring her back. And she'd be fine. Because that whole thing about she got to go somewhere, she got to go home. She's in the car, she's driving, she's riding, she's not driving. And then she calmed down. Other people, it's let's change the topic. Let's watch a movie. Let's get something to eat. And then we'll take you home. Let's go call cousin such and such, or call your daughter, and then we'll take you home. And so you're not going to argue that, no, Mommy, you can't go home. No, Papa, you can't go home because da-da-da.
Or you don't live in San Juan anymore. You live here in Rochester.
That's right,
right.
You don't live in Brooklyn. You don't live in Miami.
Right,
you live here in Rochester.
Right.
So then you distract them, right? And then as the time goes by and the sun goes down, you'll find that they calm down.
Yeah.
And so some people struggle with this because they say, I don't want to lie to them. And it's not lies. It's a kindness.
Yeah.
You are helping to redirect them.
Right.
Because you can't reason with them. That ability to reason is gone.
It's gone, yeah.
So you have to now be the bigger person and come up with that strategy. Some families have found it's very helpful to close the blinds and the curtains, so you can't see that it's getting dark.
Right, gotcha.
So that, maybe at 4:00, all the blinds are closed. right? If you have a house where there's no blinds in front of the window, maybe now it's time to go upstairs and watch TV upstairs, or maybe it's time to go in the basement where it's darker and do something there. Maybe abuela can help fold clothes, or maybe abuela can help you put some things away that you store in the basement, and the basement's dark. So you got to think like that.
The other thing that I've seen is getting what happened during the day, like mixing it up with something in the evening. Like, for example, I remember a situation once where my aunt, she was with us. Like, we're a lot of, we're, I don't know, I don't even know how many we are. We're a whole bunch, right? When we're all together, nieces and nephews, that kind of thing. And so with my uncle, we were in the habit that we would always joke with my uncle. Like, he was a jokester, and he allowed us to joke with him. And so we had that, good relationship with him. And I remember there was a time where we were joking with him and playing around with him. We would hug him and, mess up his hair, whatever. And then that evening, my aunt was like, you were with all those women. And, but it wasn't. It was us, And so does that often happens too,
Yes.
where they mix up what happened with the day with something totally that now they're making up?
When they're having a sundowning moment, or they're progressing in the Alzheimer's and the memory loss, they don't remember who people are. So I know with my mother-in-law, it was very hard for my husband because he was the baby of the family. And she kept wanting to see her baby, Tony. She wanted to see 10-year-old Tony. And she was like, who is this grown 40-something-year-old man trying to touch me and get away from me? I don't know you. And she'd holler and just, somebody come take this man away. I don't know this man. My husband don't want other men touching me. Who is this man? And so, again, you can't, trying to correct them does not help anything. Somebody has to kind of keep track of who do they remember and who do they not remember, right? So maybe knowing that mama doesn't remember these 3 nieces or these 3 daughters, that when they want to be around dad, maybe we take mom somewhere else, because all she sees is other women. She
Other
doesn't
women,
understand.
yeah.
Because her daughters are little girls with ribbons and bows in their hair and shorts and bobby socks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The other thing is, just becoming very affectionate. Because, my aunt was always she was one of my favorite aunts. She was very loving, very caring. But I never exhibit her being very affectionate with my uncle in public. And then all of a sudden she wanted to kiss him. She wanted to hug him. And, he would be extremely uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
So that
And
tell
that's
us a little bit about that too.
So that's a symptom, again, people not understanding boundaries and limits. So this is where, again, you've got to work with who you have and what they're comfortable with. So for him to understand, okay, she doesn't have good boundaries. So if she's going to be affectionate, then maybe we need to move you to another room, or you need to tough it out a little bit until somebody can intervene and redirect her to do something else. Right. So, okay, we know, okay, you don't like a lot of kissing and hugging. Okay, so, all right, she gave you about 3-4 kisses. Okay, now somebody need to get up and
I'm sure that they did, but not publicly.
Right. So this is something she's used to privately. Right. But also it may be a change in her personality. She may not have been demonstrative. She may never have been the initiator of affection. But now she got Alzheimer's, she's the initiator of affection. He's like, who are you? You've never been like this. Okay, so now we have a new person who's doing new things. Let's come up with a strategy of how to deal with this new behavior.
I want to go back to the caregiver because, like you said, we all know plenty of people that are dealing with a family member that may have Alzheimer or dementia, and the toll that it takes on folks. Some people I find that, are there, are supportive, are helping, are doing everything that they can. And then I've seen others where they're just totally handoffish. They just cannot handle it. They just cannot comprehend, the person that they knew to the person that's now. So talk to us a little bit about, because I see more the handoffish than I see, the ones involved in being able to deal with it. And obviously it's their own, right? It's their own thing. It's
stuff,
not what's
yes.
happening with the person,
Yes,
but their own
yes.
selves, and how difficult and maybe how common
Yes.
that can be, that
It's-
they're not alone.
Yes, it's very common, and you're not alone if you're a family. You've got 5 siblings, and only 2 are the ones looking after Poppy.
Mm-hmm.
Verbally beating up on the other 3 is not going to make them change how they are.
Yeah.
What you can do is ask them to do the indirect things that are helpful. Maybe they can go buy groceries for Poppy.
Or pay the bills.
For Poppy. Or cut the grass. Or make sure the house is cleaned. So that's their way of helping. But them actually interacting with Poppy, they're not that person. They're not made that way. They can't do it.
Yeah, they
Leave
can't
it
handle
alone.
it.
They can't
Yeah.
handle it.
Yeah.
So you can't, it doesn't help to push somebody to do something they can't handle. That's
Yeah.
one. The second thing is whoever is the primary caregivers are going to get burned out and stressed out. They've got their own houses. They've got their own spouses, their own family, their own life, their own jobs. And still they want to be that good child and take care of their parent. But again, they need to take care of themselves. So it's important that if there's other people who can help with the caregiving, the direct caregiving, who are willing, look to those people. Yeah. So that, say you're the daughter you're retired and you've decided you're going to stay home and take care of Poppy. And Poppy's a handful. You need some time to yourself. So you need to lean into maybe your children and one of them come twice a week to have lunch with Poppy. So you can go get your hair done, get your nails done. Just take a nap. Just have a break.
Just have a break. Yeah.
And we call that break respite. It's not a term we know culturally, but we have family do it. And so if we have family that we trust, let the family do it. If you're a member of a church and you have church members who want to help, give them something specific. If you don't want them to sit with Poppy, ask them to pick up the dry cleaning. Ask them to take care of a car repair for you or to take care of the grass.
Right.
If you're comfortable with them, if Poppy was active in the Bible study, okay, well, ask 1 or 2 people from the Bible study or ask the minister or the ministerial assistant to come over and read some passages and pray with Poppy. And that just gives you a break for an hour.
Right.
But you want to lean on other people to help you. You've got to understand that you're going to wear yourself out. You're not going to get enough sleep. You're going to be stressed. You're not eating well. You're not taking care of your bills in your house. So you've got to make sure you're taking care of yourself. So asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of good planning and taking care of yourself.
Yeah, and I think, those that are listening that may be that one sibling that just can't handle it, you just gave a long list of how all the other ways that they can possibly help. Yes. Right? But just hiding and pretending that this is not happening is not helping anybody. It's not helping you, and it's not helping your sibling that is taking care of your parent. It's not helping your parent. I know with my mom, like I said, we took turns. Between my sister, my oldest brother, and myself, and then I moved out, and then my niece moved in, so she kind of took my role. But we all had other things that we were doing. Like after I moved out, I would come on the weekend and give my mom a bath, right? And that was my job. And I think on Saturdays or something, I can't remember, I would also cook. So not just give her a bath, but also make sure that she ate. And my other siblings the same way. My brothers didn't necessarily come and cook, but they would buy her dinner. So, one was responsible on Saturday evenings to bring her dinner and so on and so forth. So everybody chipped in. And even with that chipping in and helping, we saw how my sister, who was there most of the day, and also took her to her appointments and, make sure she took her medication and all these other things. We would see how that would stress her out, and then trying to give her a break. And I know one of the things we would do, she loved the movies, so we would give her gift cards to go to the movies. Nice. On the weekend when you weren't with mom, you can go to the movies and enjoy yourself and that type of thing. So just being thoughtful and mindful in that way that, yes, you're right, and admit it. Listen, I can't handle it. I can't do it. I'm not the one, but what else can I do? Right? And then being able to help in those ways. Yeah.
And also, there's services out here. So if your loved one is eligible for a home health aide, again, put pride aside, get that home health aide. If they're eligible for nursing care, get that nurse and my husband was a famous, I don't like people in my house. Well, you're going to have people in your house because one person can't do everything.
Yeah.
You know, and when you have someone who's confused, you want the family dynamics to be well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share a story so for example, my mother-in-law, we were the weekend respite. She'd come for the weekend. And so she was sad. She had her snacks. She had her lunch. So I'm going in the basement and doing laundry, right? Left her by herself. And now here comes another sibling coming to visit the house and comes in, and here's my mother-in-law. I've been here by myself all day. No one's been here. I don't know where I am. And they're like, oh my gosh, they get on the phone. And I'm like, I'm in the basement. I can hear you. She has now been by herself all day. I fed her. And I said, okay, this is why she needs an aide. She actually needs somebody with her.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And I'd say to my husband, so if I sit with your mother all day, I can't do laundry. I can't cook.
Right. So you're going to have to do laundry. You're going to have to
I can't clean nothing.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And then you want me
You can't be out of her sight.
I can't be out of her sight. So, you know, like you said, you find people in the family who can do what. So there were some who I can't really stay with her. I can't have the same conversation 12 times. She keeps asking me the same things all the time. Well, it didn't bother me, but it bothered others. Yeah. But others would be like, I'll go get the home health aide because the bus takes an hour and a half. And this one person lives in Henrietta, and mama gonna stay with somebody who lives in Greece, and then mama gonna stay with somebody who lives in in Chile. And so we had people. Their job was to go get the home health aide,
pick her up and
drop her off. Yeah. Somebody else take them to appointments. Yeah. Somebody else make sure she had her medication. Yeah. Somebody else wash her hair. Yeah. So you find those things, and you find those services. Yeah. And let me tell you, there's a huge need for home health aides in Rochester and Monroe County. Every single agency is looking for people, and they're looking for bilingual people. And the Alzheimer Association, we're working with some agencies to teach them about Alzheimer and dementia and how to work with people with these situations. And so if you have a young person who's really patient with grandma or abuela or that might be a career for them. So think about that. Yeah. Then you've got these other programs like the CD Pass. You hear them advertise if people have straight Medicaid, you can hire a family. Yeah. So, you know, you can actually employ family. Yeah. So this is a whole other lane of support that's available. Yeah. Which,
you know, I wish we would have I wish those services were there when my mom, because I know with my sister, although she, you know, she never complained about money or anything, but I knew that it was, you know, a strain for her to have to come and drive to our house every day, you know, and drive back home, even with the gas. And, you know, sometimes we would give her gas cards and stuff like that. But even that, right, you know, there is an expense to when you're doing this 24 hours a day, taking care of someone. Yeah. So, you know, I like the idea that someone that person knows and trusts and is, you know, knows this person can get paid for taking care of them. Yeah.
And that the family trusts. That's the key thing. Because when somebody, again, when that person who's losing their memory says, I didn't eat today, nobody came to see me. Like you said, you get the sign-in sheet. You know, younger people, everything, they got video. They probably put it on the camera and share. You know, you can share it in the group chat or family chat. So now everyone sees what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I want to try to do a short summary. And I want to give you the opportunity because you said you've been practicing your Spanish. So, you know, what do you want to share with us in Spanish that you think you can do comfortably?
Hay 10 hábitos saludables para su cerebro. Es importante guarda su cerebro y hace actividades bueno para aprender cosas nuevas. Controle su presión arterial y muévese. Tomar ejercicio, andan cualquier ejercicio quieres. Mantén la diabetes. Y una cosa que no hablamos sobre la importancia de dormir. Los médicos creen que durmiendo 7 a 8 horas cada noche es como medicina para su cerebro. Limpia el cerebro cuando dormir y entonces puede pagar atención más específica a sus pensamientos, hay más claro y es una prevención para demencia.
Yeah. So you talked about, exercising, controlling your diabetes and your high blood pressure, but you also mentioned about sleeping 7 to 8 hours a day, that it really helps clear your mind and be focused. Because we didn't talk about, sleeping patterns when we spoke in English. So thank you for sharing that. That was really good. You definitely are practicing. Tell us, where can people call? Where can people get some of this information? You brought a ton of resources here, which are awesome. If people wanted to get a hold of some of these books, you even have a Color Your Mind Alzheimer book, which I think is, I love adult coloring. It's one of my favorite things to do. But you even have a book like that. So tell us where people can find all of this information.
Yes. So we have a 1-800 number that we like people to use, 1-800-272-3900. And you can call that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can ask for the Rochester office and they will transfer you and we can help you with whatever you may need.
Now, if someone wanted to come and have a consultation with you guys, what would that look like? And do you have people that are fully bilingual that can take care of people in their native language?
So we do have fully bilingual people at the 800 number because that's based out of Chicago. So we do have Spanish language staff 24/7.
Okay.
Locally, you would just get me.
Okay. That's why you're practicing.
Es porque estoy practicando
Yeah.
para ayudar a la gente. So we would sit down and we actually have a planning template where we help people identify what are the things that are needed in the home and who would do what.
Okay.
So that's one service we have. We also help people identify what are the risks and what are the warning signs. So again, is it just, maybe I took the wrong medication, I forgot to take some medication, it's maybe a little loopy, or am I really starting to have some early signs of dementia?
Okay.
So we can help people figure that out.
Yeah.
And then we also have support groups. So we have groups that meet in person and online. So people going through the same situations and just that support of other people.
Right.
So we have caregivers that are all male support groups, all female support groups. We have evening and we have midday. And then we've been trying to start a Spanish Latino group, but we haven't had much success. People don't come.
Okay.
So, that's
interesting. Are you looking to hire anyone that may speak Spanish? Is that something that your program is looking for at this point?
Not at this point, but we're hoping maybe in the future.
Yeah. And that might be helpful in forming a group,
Right.
Hopefully someone that the community knows and trusts.
Yeah.
The messenger is so important, right? Who the messenger is.
Who the messenger is,
And so a lot of times these things don't happen because you don't have the right people forming those groups. Because I think, definitely the need is there. Like I said, we both spoke about, we know tons of people that are dealing with this, either with their parents or their grandparents or whatever. So there's definitely a need out there. But I think, having something to consider, right?
Yeah.
I know sometimes it's not easy because these things are, and how is this paid? How do people, is this something that comes through Medicaid or, if someone wanted services, is this free or how does this get paid?
So
because this is a lot of good information and I know it doesn't come cheap.
No, anything from the Alzheimer Association, we're funded through New York State Department of Health.
Okay.
They actually have some funding where they ran the numbers and they realized if we can help support people to keep their loved ones at home, that's actually more cost effective than going into a nursing home.
Yeah.
And for those who have to go to a nursing home, we try and support people enough to delay that
Yeah.
It may be something that has to happen, but
Yeah.
you want to have that as late as possible.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially for a person that's suffering from dementia, to go from something that their home that they probably have been in,
Yes.
forever. Like, my mom, we couldn't even think about putting my mom anywhere. I mean, I never got to that point, but we couldn't even think about putting her anywhere because, and she wanted to be home, and even when she ended up in the hospital and then shortly after that into hospice, her preference would have been home instead of anywhere else. So most people want to be home, with their loved ones. Yeah. But sometimes it's not possible. Yeah. But I'm glad that's kind of like a last resort for you guys, that you try everything else beforehand.
Yes.
So if you could tell us the number again, where people can reach you. If they're looking for the local Rochester location, should they be asking for you personally?
Yes, they should ask for me personally.
Okay, so just give us that information again.
So 1-800-272-3900.
Okay.
And again, if you want to reach me directly, you can just ask for Arlene Wilson.
Okay. Lo voy a decir en español para esas personas que quizás estén buscando información sobre demencia o Alzheimer, si están ahora mismo bregando con alguien que está sufriendo de esas enfermedades. Ellos pueden llamar al 8000-272-3900 y ahí pueden hablar con una persona bilingüe. Si desean algo local, pueden pedir para la región de Rochester y se pueden comunicar directamente con Arlene y ellos lo pueden ayudar. Ellos también están buscando una manera de formar un grupo de apoyo para esas personas que hablan español. So, si hay un interés en eso o si alguien quisiera, ¿verdad?, ayudar, formar ese grupo, favor, comuníquense con Arlene para poder formar ese grupo, porque sé que la necesidad está ahí. Todos conocemos a alguien que está sufriendo o de demencia o de Alzheimer's, y aquí el enfoque es más en las personas que están cuidando a la persona que está enfermo. Porque obviamente la persona que está enfermo pues está en su propio mundo, ella a veces ni sabe lo que está pasando a su alrededor. Pero aquí la presión en sí y lo más difícil es para las personas que lo están cuidando. Qué apoyos ellos pueden recibir, y ellos tienen un montón de recursos que le puede ayudar con cómo bregar mejor con la persona que está enferma de dementia y de Alzheimer's. So I was just saying, that if anybody out there that wants to start a support group, or,
please,
knows a few others that would like to be a part of that, I think it's really important, that they contact you and maybe, something can be started. I think it's a great need. I think it's something that people may not realize, how helpful it could be to be able to have others that are going through the same thing and give each other's ideas. I know that I share the sign-in story with anybody that I know, because that really helped us, keep my mom on track and not have her go as far as she could have had we not been doing that.
Right.
And the importance of that body, that body contact and human contact that we need. And we're human, especially Latinos, we love having our family around and gatherings and things like that. And so, we can't get afraid of what we're seeing, because it's definitely, it is frightening, for you to know someone in a certain way, and then all of a sudden they've completely changed. So that within itself can be very, very frightening, especially for young kids that, we're always with abuelita, and now abuelita doesn't even know who they are. That can be very scary. And so we can't let that fear keep us away, because it's important to be around them.
And I would just like to share just a couple of final thoughts that as your family and loved ones get into the later stages of Alzheimer's, when they're not talking and they kind of have that vacant stare, the one thing that's still remembered is the touch. So to hold their hand makes such a big difference. If there's a song they always liked. We've heard stories of people who been church people the whole lives, and they may sit and not say anything, but if they hear a certain Bible song or a certain church hymn, they'll look up and you'll see the light come back into their eyes. Even if they can't talk, they're still taking that in. So that's important. All of that is important.
I remember seeing a video of a woman who was a dancer. She was a ballerina dancer, and they played, I think it was something from from the play of The Swan.
Okay.
And she quickly just started, obviously sitting in her wheelchair, but her arms, she was just forming all these, movements of when she would dance. And so definitely that music triggered her, and she, and then when the music stopped, she stopped moving. But definitely music, if people loved music and enjoyed music, and I know the touching is another thing that...
And the little things. I know as my mom got toward the end, she was always very vain about her nails. As you see, I picked that up from her.
Yeah.
So if she may not really understand what was going on the TV, there was nothing really to talk about, but I could always pivot back to, let me do your nails. And she loved just watching me paint her nails.
So, well, thank you so much for being with us today. I always like to end the show by asking if there's a phrase or a saying that resonates, that you grew up listening to, that still resonates with you today, and I don't know if you have one.
So, to those who much has been given, much is expected. So that's one of mine. I didn't like it a lot when I was younger. I'm like, that's not fair. That's so not fair.
Yeah.
But as I get older, I understand. When you've gone through things in life and you've seen things in life, you do have to step up. You do have to help.
Yeah.
And the older we all get, the more we know. So we have to do better. We have to help our younger people. We have to help those our same age who are less fortunate, or even those who are older who are less fortunate. And so, even in this job, I said, wow, why am I at Alzheimer's? Why is the world putting me toward this? I said, well, because Arlene, you've been through this. This isn't just a theory for you. I've been through this.
You've experienced it.
I've experienced this. And so if I can, bring some ideas, and I can bring some empathy and understanding to people, I think I need to do that.
And I think when you mentioned the race and discrimination, I never even, I didn't put those two things together, but it makes a lot of sense. So even bringing that forward, right, that you can actually speak of that is really important. So thank you for being the messenger for us today, and thank you for bringing all of this information. And we definitely would love to have you back at some point.
Oh, good.
If there's any updates or anything like that, or if something changes with your organization, and maybe you start that support group, right, and invite people for that.
Yes.
So so we'll be glad to have you back. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Gracias a todos por acompañarnos en esta mañana. Lo esperamos nuevamente el próximo sábado de 10 a 11 de la mañana en Poder 97.1 FM, la única estación radial latina con dueños y operados por latinos, por la comunidad, para la comunidad. Esto ha sido su hora informativa, trayendo la información importante que nos inspira a una mejor calidad de vida. Que pasen una linda semana. Hasta la próxima, mi gente.